Have you ever read a book that gave you so many thoughts, you had to make a YouTube video about it? Hey everybody, hope you're keeping cozy. It's me, Sam, and welcome to my channel. Is this going to be a series? I don't know, we'll have to see. The crux of it is, I'm in a book club, and we're going over a year now, been in it for over a year, and it's been really fun. But of course, when you get a bunch of people in a book club, you're gonna get some recommendations that you didn't enjoy necessarily. And I've realized something though. As much fun as it is reading a book you enjoy, it's much more interesting reading a book you don't enjoy. And something I've been really trying to do lately, especially with so much time on my hands, is I want to try and develop my skills in having genuine conversations with people, because it's something I've always struggled with. I talk over people, I bulldoze them, and I don't want to do that. It's always an awful feeling when you try to talk to someone and you're excited about something and they just stop you dead in your tracks because one, they're not interested, they're not listening, or they express like, oh, I hated that. Like, conversations are a two-way street. And if someone kind of blocks you off, you're just so defeated and deflated and you're like, oh, okay. And then the conversation's over and nothing was gained by either party. And I don't want to be that person who does that. I want to develop my communication skills. And what better way to develop these skills than with something as low stakes as literature opinions? It's no big deal if someone enjoyed a book I didn't enjoy, and vice versa. But I want to still be able to have a conversation with that person. I sat and thought deeply about what I didn't enjoy about this particular book, so I could discuss it in a way that didn't seem too aggressive, that didn't seem like a personal attack, because I don't want to do that. But I'm also not going to sit here and lie and say that I liked it, but have like an actual genuine conversation, and also to think critically. I think it's really important that we think critically about the stuff we consume, and we think critically about the reactions that we have to things we consume. Especially now, our nerves are so raw, we just kind of keep everything at the surface, and we just react because it's easy to do. It's easy to just react to something, and it's easy to kind of shut out any sort of conversation that makes you look inward, because looking inward can be scary and difficult. So we just sort of lash out either in an extremely negative or positive way, depending on the thing we're talking about, to steer the conversation in a way we'd like it to go. And it's not the most constructive, and it's not the most, open communication model. And that's what I'm trying to do. And for the book, these are issues I had with the book as a reading experience, as just, a thing that I did. It can tell you a bit about what I enjoy about books and what I don't, but I'm hoping we can talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's just have a conversation and think critically in a way where, when you think critically, it doesn't mean you can't enjoy things. It doesn't mean you have to hate certain things. As long as you are aware, like, okay, this is where this emotion is coming from. This is where this critique is coming from. And is it something that you could talk through with someone, or is it a deal breaker? The reason I'm doing it here in book club is for the same reason that book club, we have quite a few members, so I don't want to talk over people, but I have so many thoughts about this book that I was like, I wrote a script. Like, I feel a genuine desire to express these thoughts and emotions. Why not with a YouTube video? So the reason I'm doing a video and not in book club is because in a video, I don't have to wait my turn. I don't have to make sure that other people have the opportunity to speak. I can kind of talk as long as I want without being interrupted and without worrying about interrupting anybody. I do tend to interrupt people. My sun is in Aries, my moon is in Aries. We've got a lot of fiery energy here that wants to come out. and we want to do it in a way that is respectful and hopefully introspective. We want to channel that energy. We want to channel it into something productive. Channel it. 2022. Let's get introspective. We're stuck inside. The world as we know it has changed. What better way to if we're rethinking the way the world works, what better way to rethink the way your brain works? That's exciting, isn't it? Because another thing this will be good practice for is also recognizing my initial emotional reaction to something and taking the time to form my thoughts and communicate them properly, rather than just reacting. And that's really hard to do, especially if you have a negative reaction to something. It's easy to just spout whatever you're feeling that wants to come out, but that doesn't take into consideration the people who are hearing it, the people you're speaking to. It's a very self-isolated act. I think it's a good skill to develop. This is just about book opinions, and as much as we love our books, I'd love more to be able to talk about books with people regardless of what they enjoy. And sometimes someone's enjoyment of a book will help me see their side and help me understand what was good about the book that my gut reaction kind of kept me from seeing. And that's usually really fun. It's like, oh, I kind of did like that about the book. All my negative reactions kind of kept me from recognizing that. But talking to other people, it's just like, oh, yeah, that actually was kind of nice. And it helps you understand each other a bit better. I like to think I know a little bit more about the people in my book club, and they know a bit more about me in terms of books in general. So if this is a series or not, again, I don't know if it will be, but I think if it would be, a question I want to ask myself every time before I get started or after I'm done a book is, was I the intended audience for this work? Because context is important. Like, I can't judge a book too harshly if it was written for toddlers, for retirees, for single fathers, I want to try to take that into account. And I believe I have with this sort of breakdown, but we'll see. We'll get to that. Spoilers ahead. From the get-go after the breakdown, I really want to know what other people have thought of this book. I'm genuinely interested. But if you haven't read it and you're curious and you don't mind spoilers, I'd also like to get your thoughts as well. Would it put you off of the book, or do you kind of want to read and judge for yourself? I do that quite a bit. Like, if there's a critique of something, I usually try to experience it myself to see if I feel the critiques were justified or not. And I'm welcoming you, encouraging you to do the same. The 3 issues that we're going to talk about today are the show don't tell problem. They're so mature for their age. Tropes! All the tropes. So the first question I'm going to ask myself, was I the intended audience for this book? I don't think so, no. I'm an almost 30-year-old lady reading about 17-year-old girls coming of age. That's not to say a coming-of-age story, a story about younger people, can't be universally enjoyed and appreciated. I just don't think this was the one to do that for me. I've read lots of stories about younger people and have enjoyed them. If I was reading this if I was younger, a lot of things wouldn't have appeared so jarring to me. I think I would have glazed over quite a lot of it. Just because, when you're young, I don't know, that just wasn't my frame of mind when I went into reading. That being said, had I read this when I was younger, I still don't think I would have enjoyed it because of the reasons we're going to get into in the video. Show don't tell is a writing technique that allows the reader to experience expository details of the story through actions, sensory details, words, or the expression of characters' emotions, as opposed to the author's own description of events. And that definition is from masterclass.com. So what I found about the Sisters Grimm is that it had a really big problem with this in that in its narrative style, in its writing style, we are being told, not shown, what is happening. We're even kind of being told, not shown, how the girls are feeling. And that that can work. That's not to say that like it can't work. I just feel, I'm going to use this phrase a lot. If it was intended, I don't think it did service to the story. I'm going to use that phrase a lot. And what I mean by service to the story, I mean kind of service as essentially an entertainment experience, if that makes any sense. Like when you read a fiction book, you are hoping to be a bit entertained, a bit immersed, and if there are things that are included in the story, even if they were very conscious choices, sometimes pull you out a little bit. And that I find with a lot of media that has that problem, the show don't tell problem, it's very difficult to stay immersed and kind of lose yourself a bit. The show don't tell problem kind of makes it like when you're told and not shown, it reminds you are being told a story rather than you're in it, you're in the thick of it. And don't get me wrong, I, especially in movies and TV shows, I love a good narration. I love an unreliable narrator. Like I do enjoy that if it's done in a certain way. So for the Sisters Grimm, I don't think it does a service because it pulls us out constantly, and essentially the characters are characterized by the thoughts they think, if that makes any sense. And they're not thinking like, and normal thoughts. So a big problem is we're constantly switching perspectives, and that can be very difficult to keep track of. So that on top of the show don't tell issue makes it just so glaringly obvious where you're kind of like, I'm just, what? And the fact that Goldie is the only one with a first person narrative and all the other girls are third person. Again, I'm not sure why that was done, because for the girls, for their third person narration, it's still very much within their perspective. We don't have an omniscient narrator with the other three girls, and Goldie is very much in first person, so we know she's not omniscient, but she's also not, thinking how we normally would think. Like she's very poetic, and I think that is supposed to characterize her character, but because we are relying on her to tell us what is going on, that all falls to her and how she perceives the world. So we are not getting a lot of info because, one, she's part of the world, and two, the author is also trying to characterize her at the same time, as well as give us all the information, and that's really, really hard to do. I noticed I'm very picky when it comes to my perspectives. I'm a huge fan of third person, rarely first person, because to do first person is so hard to do well, and it's like, I'm not gonna lie, I know writing is hard. Writing is difficult. I have tried to do it. I talk to people who do it. You read interviews. Like, I'm not gonna say that writing a story and being an author is not a very difficult profession. And of course, you're not gonna please everybody. But it's, with this, it got to the point where I was just being pulled out of it. And I think that's one of the instances where if I had been younger, it maybe wouldn't have pulled me out that much. I wouldn't have noticed it that much. But as I've gotten older, I've noticed it's something that I really struggle with. The first person perspective. The book is also written in present tense, which again can work, and but it's very, I think, difficult to read because it doesn't let you just like sit and get cozy. So kind of if you're watching a play and a narrator kind of pops out and is in the audience every once in a while to add a little something to it, depending on how it's done, maybe you really like that, but maybe it pulls you really out of the story. You're like, oh yeah, I'm sitting in a theater and I'm watching a play. With me, that's how the show don't tell issue evolved in this book, where I just constantly felt very much that I was reading a book. A few egregious instances that this happens. That's again, I don't want to like nitpick and take every little thing, but I do want to show you some examples to maybe get you to understand what I mean by the show don't tell problem. So our main character, Goldie. we meet her, and she's characterized as someone who loves literature. She loves poetry. She whispers poems to her plant, like, beautiful. It was like, the characterizations at the beginning, I quite liked. I was like, okay, like, here we go. Like, this is interesting. So we know she loves to read. And then a few chapters after, like maybe about a third of the way through, there's a sentence that says, it's her perspective. Her chapters are always first person, and she says, numbers were always really hard for me, unlike words, period. I love books, period. That sentence was almost like a slap in the face to me. Not because it was bad, but because it was kind of like, but I know, but I also have a theory. It's like, we know she loves books. That sentence seemed a bit odd. Girl, I know you love books. I was paying attention. That being said, though, when I read that sentence, I was actually like, wait a minute. I haven't seen her read a book. I haven't seen her hold a book. And then since that sentence, I tried to keep track. We never see her pick up a book after. So that's the thing. It's the show don't tell. We are being told she loves books, but we're not being shown her love of books. And I understand her character she's very busy. She's holding down a job. She's raising her younger brother. Like, I would understand that she wouldn't have time, but she also never says, gosh, I wish I was just like sitting somewhere reading, or she doesn't like look longingly at some like beautiful volumes in the hotel. She just, she has to remind you that she loves books because we haven't been shown that she has. We've only been told. And that's not to say that like, it's fine that she has told us she loves books. Even still, it like never comes up. It never comes up in the story. It's never important to the story. It's never important in the climax. It never comes up again. And any of you that have read the book, you might be saying, but Sam saw her read Leo's diary. And to that, I have to politely say, I am sorry, you are incorrect. We never see her actually pick up the diary. Leo theorizes that she has read it. She confirms to him that she has. But we never see her like pick it up and hold it. We never even see her like kind of put it away. The chapter is like, she is like, yeah. So that's one instance of, if you wanted to add that a character was very literate, was very like poetic, she does that. That's the thing. She does a good job of portraying that she is very poetic. So these instances of where she kind of has to ram it home to us feel a bit odd. They kind of feel a bit jarring. You're like, whoa, okay. So the next instance I'm going to talk about, or instances where the show don't tell problem is quite prominent, is whenever Lyanna experiences racism. And I don't want to go too deep on this, because who am I to speak of a young black girl's experience moving from Ghana to the UK? Like, I can't speak to that. But the author is also not black. So, her knowledge, I take with a grain of salt. Writing is hard. I'm going to keep reiterating that. And especially if you're like, I want diverse characters. I want to write about people who don't look or live like me. Like, I want to include that so people can read about it. That's important. These are important kind of goals to have. But the problem with the narrative style and the writing style and the show don't tell problem is that whenever Lyanna is experiencing racism, it's in these instances, again, where we're not really being shown all the information. It's very much through her perspective, which is important. And I am fully aware that this can be someone's experience, that they can walk out the door and just be bombarded with these awful experiences, these experiences of racism. That I know to be true. That I know is someone's truth, someone's life. But because I'm reading a story, I'm expecting a little bit of I don't really know how to describe it. It's the same with Goldie. All the characters have this problem where anything that is happening to them feels so far removed from you, the reader, that you're kind of not sure what's going on. You are a bit confused. At least I was. Or not confused. You want more. You want more information. You want to know really what's going on. And especially with these parts being in third person, you're like, why am I not being told more about what's going on? That's entirely possible. And unfortunately, I found that, again, these instances were so jarring. They pulled me so out of the book. They made me feel like Lyanna's experience wasn't given the care and consideration it really should have been. It's the same with all the girls, where like all their experiences, it's like I want more time with them. I want to really be here with them. But for Lyanna, for whatever reason, is the only character who experiences racism, despite not being the only BIPOC character in the book. B is not white, but she doesn't experience racism. And that's not to say, everyone experiences racism. It's not, straight across the board, everybody's experience is the same. But to have that be solely on Lyanna, and quite often, essentially anytime she leaves the house and has to interact with people, again, I know this can be someone's reality. It probably is someone's reality. But again, it just felt like the care wasn't put into it. It felt a bit like it was there to remind you that she is Black. And, don't get me wrong. We know that sometimes, especially for younger audiences, you do have to remind people that a character they are reading about is not white. Sometimes you do have to remind people consistently. So there is lots of evidence that this is not a white character. I can definitely, understand that feeling that you need to do that. Like, I don't think the author did this with any sort of ill intent, with any malice. I do think that she tried her best to honor that part of Lyanna, but I think just because of the style of it, I think it just came up a bit short. Yeah, I just think it just missed the mark. Not too badly. I think it was great that it was included at all, but it could have been more, So that's what I have to say about that. Moving along. The next instance is actually the last bit in the story, where it's essentially the climax. Like, it is kind of the big fight. They have come into their power, and suddenly they are completely different people. So it is kind of like these girls that we've been reading about up until this point are now gone. And these are like brand new girls. Like, these are brand new people. They have power, they have might, they have talons, they look like moonlight, they're beautiful. Even though the whole book they've been telling about how each girl is extraordinarily beautiful, even though she doesn't know it. Except maybe B. B kind of knows it, which is what makes her one of my favorites. But again, the payoff wasn't there. We are being told that now they are confident, or they remember who they truly are now. And now they're just different people. And they remember who they truly are because they have entered this magical place. And I think maybe my frustration is even as I make this video, I'm recognizing what the author was trying to do. Like, the whole your power and your confidence, it's always been there. You were born with it. But because of the way the story is written, that it goes so back and forth, and it's only through these girls' perspectives, it doesn't feel earned for the characters, that they are suddenly magical. And that was kind of the frustrating thing as well, where that they're powerful and magical, and now you're just kind of waiting for them to realize it, but not in an entertaining way. That's just that was the crux of it for me, is that because I was just told this is how it was, So it didn't feel earned. It didn't feel satisfying. I actually watched another review of Grimm. I'll post a link below because it was a very nice review. She expressed it very well where she said, the book had me struggling because it was telling me the what and not the how and not the why. And that's what I mean by the show don't tell problem. The book is just telling me this, but it's not telling me how we got there or why it's there. I find when a lot of books have the show don't tell problem, you do feel like you want more, but not in a good way. You're just kind of like, I feel like I was missing information and I was not satisfied by the end. The last 100 pages, I'll actually say they were quite good. Because it was a bit more linear, and it was like we were now getting to like the thing we'd been building up to for like 300 pages, which was them getting into the place, remembering, and like being there. But speaking of the last pages, I said we meet the girls, they come into their power. They actually don't really remember everything right as they enter, because this brings me to the second point. They remember everything after they have killed someone. They have murdered. And it's after they have murdered these men that they have had inappropriate relationships with. And that brings me to my second point. So my second issue with the book, which is they're so mature for their age. And what I mean by that is the adultification of young girls, which I really hate. This is the one issue that made me almost put the book down, because it's just no go for me. And it's it was a main reason why I wanted to make this video. My concern is internalizing these messages, like these 4 young girls have inappropriate relationships with adult men. These girls are 17 years old. They have not turned 18 yet. And they all have inappropriate relationships with men who are older than them. One is as old as 28. A 28-year-old should not be interested in a 17-year-old. One girl is having, B has a relationship with a professor, which is no-go. These relationships are portrayed as desirable, exciting. They frame the girls as having the power in these relationships because they're beautiful and they're desirable. In B's case, she's a badass, so like, an older guy wouldn't have like power over her. And with Scarlet, like she desires him so much. But it's like these are grown men. In Scarlet's case, again, a grown man who wants to buy her grandmother's bakery for Starbucks. So this is an adult man. I can only assume he's at least 28, maybe 25. But to go and negotiate a deal to purchase property, a business, he's got to be at least that. And he seduces her, and it works. But again, they're being portrayed as if they have all the power. And I know, I grew up, I was the Twilight generation, where we all read this book, and we thought Edward and, oh my god, I forget his name, Jacob. His name. We thought Edward and Jacob were real romantic. We were like, goals, we want these men. And then again, of course, reading as an adult, it's like, oh dang, that was not okay. I should not have been wanting that in a guy. But definitely seeing friends have unrealistic expectations of what a man should be in a relationship, of what a relationship should be like. Unrealistic standards of how people should behave in a relationship that can be damaging, because those are your formative years, and that's when you get into more serious relationships. So my concern with this adultification of young girls is that it's being portrayed as something that's desirable, and then come to find out at the end, these men actually planned to kill them. Even Leo entered into the relationship with the full intention of murdering Goldie. And that's what all these men did. All of these men entered into these relationships with the full intention of killing them. And we get no hint of that whatsoever because we're in the girls' perspectives. So they don't think anything is amiss. They are completely unaware, sitting ducks. We have been given no hint. Nothing has been... The one thing that hasn't been told to us is how sketchy these guys are who want to kill them and who are at least 10 years older than them. And I'm getting a bit impassioned. Let's take a breath. Because this, again, almost made me put it down. Because I was like, I don't want people reading this and internalizing it and thinking it's okay. Because never in the book are we told that these relationships were not okay. The incestuous element, which was another thing entirely, which is something I was also not okay with. At least that was very obviously being told to us, this is not okay. This is weird. Why it was included, I don't know. I really don't. Just to make, like, to get across that he's, like, really not human, that he's a devil or something. But again, at least she told us, hey, like, this isn't cool. And it's like, okay, thanks for doing that. But yeah. And it's not even their romantic or sexual relationships, it's the way they live. I really don't know why the girls were 17 at all. I get that you want to appeal to your audience. It's very easy to appeal to a kind of a wide audience with a younger person, because a younger person is kind of untapped potential. They can kind of go in whatever direction. You can really see yourself in most of them. But with these girls, like they are 17, but they're leading adult lives. They are on their own, running businesses. 2 of the girls are in school, even though we don't really see them. Again, we are not shown them going to class. We are told that they're in school. But B is very much on her own. I think she lives in the dorms, but that even wasn't explicitly said. We don't know. Lyanna lives with her aunt. Lyanna, less so in this sort of adultification. I'm not sure why, but it is what it is. I'm not going to go analyzing that too deeply because, I see no reason why the girls couldn't have even been aged up to 25 and everything would be the same, except their relationships wouldn't be creepy. And, and I think people forget, at 20, I say 25 because the whole, your brain is fully developed at that point. It is crazy that we tell our young people, you have to have your life figured out before your brain is fully developed. Good luck. And maybe that's because I'm older, the older person in me kind of being like, if you're 17, you should have someone taking care of you. You should not have to deal with the burden of like an aging relative and their failing business. You should not be having to raise your older siblings. You should not be having to worry about a mother who is unwell or financial troubles. That's not to say that isn't a reality for a lot of people, and I'm sure there are a lot of young people that are living on their own, that are leading these lives. But again, the book doesn't look at that and kind of say, hey, this isn't normal. It gives the girls a certain amount of freedom to have these, in my opinion, inappropriate relationships. And it gives them more agency, a lot of agency that isn't actually afforded to 17-year-olds. A particular instance is when Scarlett is signing over her grandmother's business. Ezekiel is like, don't you want to call your solicitor, your lawyer? And it's like, yeah, you should be calling a lawyer, Scarlett. But it's like, can she call a lawyer? Is the business even in her name? Is she like a licensed business owner? Does she own the business? And the truth is probably no, it's probably in her grandmother's name. That would be a roadblock for her because she's so young. The book doesn't care that they're 17. Like, it's just an arbitrary, like, the coming of age, 17 to 18. Why put them in these situations that are so adult, but that actual 17-year-olds don't go through? Or if they did, they would look very, very different. They would not look as freeing, as glamorous, as giving you agency. So, and just the fact that it is the adultification of young girls, as in to make them more adult gives them more power, more agency. I don't like that message. It's okay to be 17 and be young. It's okay to kind of have these roadblocks because you're young, as long as you have a support system of adults that can help you navigate through it. That's not a reality for a lot of people, and for me that's very sad. One, I'm reading about these girls' like struggles, but they're not real. And that is what actually brings me to my third point, which is tropes. Now, I love a good trope. As I get older, though, I do find they're just not engaging. They're not very interesting to read because they're repetitive. Do you see how everything is kind of bleeding into each other? That the show don't tell, the adultification of the girls, it all makes the girls not feel like real people because they are like impossibly mature for their age. And because we are being told only through their perspective, nothing is kind of really grounded in reality. So they don't feel real. And even their characterizations within themselves, within the narrative style, feels very kind of heavy-handed. They're not very nuanced. We do have kind of a spectrum where Bee and Lyanna are opposite ends of the spectrum. And they were actually, in my opinion, the most interesting characters to read about because their reactions to things were very extreme. Bee with just her no-nonsense, take charge attitude, and Lyanna, who is more demure, more, or less likely to kind of fight. But at least these were identifiable traits about these characters. Goldie, I'm sorry to say, and Scarlet, I'm sorry to say, were just so middle of the road to a point where even in their narrative styles, like when they talk to people, they talk the same. They have the same kind of speaking pattern. Nothing differentiates them except for the way they say mom. Each character says the term mother in a different way, which was kind of neat. But just the fact that they are just these magical girls at opposite ends of the spectrum, and kind of throughout the middle, kind of made them feel a bit floaty, a bit like they weren't quite settled. Maybe that was a choice because, they didn't really belong in the human world and they kind of found themselves in that other world. Now we have these like very kind of confident and cool characters. They don't talk very much. And we're being explained through Goldie's perspective almost entirely throughout the last 100 pages because it's just her perspective. So we actually don't see into their minds. She just kind of feels that they're all different and better, like more confident, more powerful, is kind of the trope of powerful is good. But the biggest trope I had a problem with that made this an unenjoyable book for me is the trope of to experience trauma and to struggle makes you stronger. I'm just kind of bored of that, especially in 2022, especially telling young people the whole like, things happen for a reason, your pain makes you stronger. I like that we're turning more towards a narrative of that's not necessarily true. Like, I don't like that message. I don't like that, that you can find your power by looking within, but only when you've gone through really horrible things. Like, these girls have gone through really horrible things because of kind of the show don't tell problem. We don't dive deep into that. The book doesn't hold up a mirror to itself and say like, this sucks, because it's all within the realm of this magic system that, again, we don't know how it works. But we do get glimpses into the fact that this demon father is happy that his daughters are having these hard lives, because then it turns them to the dark side. And that's the other kind of side of this trope of that, like, when you experience bad things, you can only become worse. It's kind of a double-edged sword. Bad things shouldn't happen to you. Like, they do. They don't have to define you in any sort of way. They don't have to make you stronger. You can hate the fact that that happened to you and wish it hadn't. They don't have to make you weak. You can look back on that and say, well, I'm going to be strong. And even again, sitting here, she does kind of do that a bit But again, it's in the last 100 pages. The biggest gripe again I have is that B, who is the one who experiences the deepest tragedy of accidentally killing a boy that she loved. And so she goes to a very dangerous place within herself. So she becomes weaker to the influence of her dark father. And she doesn't get redeemed. She dies. She dies fighting on her father's side, fighting against her sisters, against what she actually truly wants. But she is so like emotionally fragile from what has happened. All she wants is her father's love. Again, it's the I want more. If you're going to do that, do it. Go deeper. Really grab onto it. And like if you're gonna like spell something out for me, spell something like that out for me. Just because you are emotionally weak and vulnerable, it's not okay. Actually, that's the thing. It's like it plays it off because it's her own perspective. She just feels weak, and she feels better when she just gives in. And like no, it's like there of all the messages you could have included in a book directed at young people, you know. And we get a bit at the end. She has a little bit of a blurb where she is this conscious being of like wind, and she is like so happy that her sisters are alive, but she's a bit jealous. And she's saying like, I now see humanity in all its colors, and it's good and bad. And that was the whole thing. It's like they're like Goldie's revelation was like, but there is no good and bad. Like we can be both. But again, we have no idea how she got there. And B just gets that blurb at the end, but she's still dead. She doesn't get to experience life with this knowledge, and I don't like that. Why did she, the one who was like, you know, the strongest, and then suddenly the weakest, why doesn't she at all, arguably the most interesting, why does she have to be the one that we don't see that through? So it's just all these three things bleeding into each other. You know, I could accept these things being present in like any book, but the fact that these were all in this book consistently throughout just made it an unenjoyable experience. The big ones being kind of those messages that I'm like, those can be interpreted a bit oddly, I find. And something I really liked, the thing that kept me reading all throughout this book, I think I was getting frustrated because I was like, I see something here. I want more. Like the premise is really cool. The world is really interesting. And there were instances where I'm like, this is good. Like this is well done. The characterization of everybody else but the girls, of the mothers, of the matriarchs of the story, and their relationships, like that was the most awesome thing. I was like, can you just these women, I kind of want that story. Give me the Mothers Grimm. Imagine reading a story about these mothers who have these magical daughters, and they either, one, know about it but are indoctrinated into the dark side, or know nothing about it and have no idea what the heck's going on. They're trying to navigate that. And that's the thing that she got to at the end, but I wanted it throughout. She got to the end that your strength actually can reside in the connections you have with other people and that don't necessarily have to be blood. It can be the people you choose, the people you find. It can be your mothers. The mother's relationship with the daughters, those were the instances where the book was like, these relationships aren't okay. Like there is something inherently, you know, unhealthy about these relationships. I wanted more of that. But she hinted at it. There were like whispers of this really cool kind of world and these relationships. And I really enjoyed that aspect, and I wanted more of that. Yeah, I wanted more. And that's kind of it for me. How did I do? Did I get too impassioned? Do you think you couldn't have had like a conversation with me about it? I did go a little bit off the rail. Have you read it? Do you agree with my critiques? Did I kind of bring to light some of the problems you had? Or do you not agree? Do you think my interpretation was a bit flawed, a bit maybe skewed? because of, you know, who I am, my experiences. That's how we interpret things, right? Through our own perspective. I'd really love to know your thoughts. But thanks so much for watching. This is your reminder to stay hydrated, stay cozy, and happy reading.